In my life after a relationship with a narcissist video, I talked through some of the stages I went through after realizing I was in an emotionally abusive relationship. And one of those stages was fear and anxiety. And those feelings were very, very real for me. And I know that many of you are going through a similar thing after realizing that you were in a relationship with a narcissist or another emotionally abusive person. And on a global level, many of us are dealing with some level of anxiety surrounding the coronavirus and the ramifications of the coronavirus on society. So I thought today would be a really good day to talk through some of the things that helped me in that stage when I was recovering from this emotionally abusive relationship, and some of the things that are helping me deal with the anxiety today. So that's what we're going to cover in today's video. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Common Ego community. My name is Christina, and on this channel we explore emotional abuse, its connection with spirituality, and we attempt to answer the question, where do we go from here? So if that all sounds good to you, be sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. If you're already part of the community, thanks and welcome back. Today I want to cover a topic that's relevant for all of us at this point, but it's extremely relevant to this community because there are reasons why we deal with fear and anxiety in the aftermath of emotionally abusive relationships. When you're in these relationships, it's very common to have those feelings like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, or like the rug is about to get swept out from under you. And you have these feelings because you're probably right. You're dealing with an emotionally unhealthy person who has swept the rug out from under you time and time again. And then the other shoe drops and things get bad again. So what happens when you're in this relationship is that the fight or flight reaction gets hyperactivated. So you have elevated levels of cortisol. And when we leave these abusive relationships, it would be great if everything would just go back to normal, but it doesn't quite happen that way. So when you leave the relationship, your cortisol levels are still likely to be out of whack. And you're still waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're still waiting for the rug to get swept out from under you. And fear and anxiety are a very real part of your life. And they're a very real part of the recovery process. But today, as I already mentioned, a lot of us are dealing with some level of fear and anxiety because of what's going on in the world around us. So I wanted to share some things that helped me personally, and there are reasons why these things were helpful, so they may help you too. If you find that something in particular resonates really well with you, go ahead and take it and try that tip. And if you find that nothing does, that's okay too. It's really important for us to all handle stress and anxiety in our own way and in ways that we feel comfortable with and confident in. So go ahead and do what works for you. So the first two tips I have are kind of specific to what's going on right now. And these are two changes that I made in my own life that I found very helpful. So I wanted to share them with you guys. The first one is to choose your news selectively and limit your time spent consuming that news. I found, probably like a lot of you out there, I found myself in periods of time where I was binging news, and I would kind of go down the rabbit hole. I would go from one article to the next, and at the end I found that it wasn't really providing enough benefit for me to be doing that. Yes, we need to stay informed. Yes, we should be consuming news at this point. We can't turn a blind eye to what's going on in the world because it does affect us. But there is a point of diminishing returns, and only you will know when you've reached it. But you can analyze how you feel and what benefits you're getting out of this time you're spending consuming that news, and try to figure out if it's really enough time, if it's maybe too much time. If you're not getting enough out of it to warrant the amount of time you're spending on it, then it's probably a good idea to cut back. Because the more time you spend on news, the more you're likely to feel anxiety. So the second change I made was to limit social media. And this is kind of related to the first change. But I found in particular that Facebook was a little problematic for me. Similar to when I was binging news, when I found out that the coronavirus was in my local area, I really felt a need to check in with everybody, to check in to see how everyone was doing and what people were talking about. And around that time, of course, I was spending more time indoors. But what I found was similar to what I found with the news. It was a little bit of an overload for me. It was a little bit too much information and sometimes misinformation. Sometimes it was people panicking and spreading fear. So I found that for me, limiting social media or eliminating the channels that made me feel more anxious was a good step. So the third tip I have for you is one that I had avoided for a really long time. You'll hear this tip often, and the tip, not to leave you hanging, the tip is to journal your thoughts and feelings. And this is something that you probably have heard before. I think we all have. But for me, I always kind of just put it off. I always thought like it was just more trouble than it's worth, or I didn't want to put in the effort. It wasn't until I was in the aftermath of the relationship with a narcissist that I realized I needed something. I just needed something. That's when I started journaling. Because I had the fear and anxiety that I was dealing with, it wasn't going anywhere on its own. So I knew I needed to look within and just start dealing with some of the stuff that I was carrying around. And so I did this and I started journaling, and it was a really positive experience for me. Because what I found was that when thoughts would stay in my head, they were so attached to the emotion within them. Within those thoughts. So there's words and then there's emotion. So you have a thought and the thought is just words, right? But the emotion that it carries is really what's damaging. When you have fear and you have anxiety and you have bad feelings, anger, when those are connected and they stay in your head, what I found was that the emotion snowballs. And the more you have that thought, the worse it feels. But when I started getting those thoughts out onto paper, when I started journaling, it was like a release. It's not magic. It's not that you just write something down and then suddenly it's gone. But what I found happened was that I would write something down and I could see the thought for what it was without so much of the emotion attached to it. And that was extremely therapeutic for me. And there's a release in just getting it out, getting it from here to here. There's somewhat of a therapeutic release in that as well. So the fourth tip that I have, and this is something that I started back then and I have continued every single day since then, because it has been so powerful for me. This tip is to practice gratitude as much as you can in this time. Try your best to find something, even something small, to be grateful for. And I emphasize the word try because in this time I'm not here to minimize what anyone is going through. And we're all dealing with things in different ways and on different levels. So again, this is going to be very personal to you. But if you can find something every day to be thankful for, to be grateful for, and if you can speak it out loud or write it down, that is going to be very powerful. I know it was for me. It's very powerful to help shift your focus towards positivity. True positivity that means something to you. It's one thing to speak words that mean something to somebody else, but when you say something that means something to you, or write it down, or just focus on it, something that's really important to you, it has a lot of power. And it can help shift your focus away from the things that you're anxious about and towards the things that you're grateful for. And over time, what I've found is that when you continue this practice, the mind kind of naturally gravitates more towards those things to be grateful for, as opposed to the things to be anxious about. And if you think this could be a good idea for you, but you're struggling to find things that you're grateful for, I suggest using gratitude prompts. This is something that I use in my 7-day self-love kickstart program, and I'll link to that in the description below and in the card. And those are a little bit specific to going through an emotionally abusive relationship. But you can just Google gratitude prompts and get a general gratitude prompt that could help you get the wheels turning and start looking for little things or big things to be grateful for in your life. The fifth tip I have is to reach out to people who are important to you. In this time, we're all a little isolated, and it can be especially difficult when you live alone. And texting is a great way to keep in touch with people to check in, but in times like these, a phone call is going to be a lot more powerful. So if you can, try to reach out to the people in your support system more often. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you, and it will be helpful for you to reach out to them. Now is also a great time if you have neighbors or just people you know of, people you care about but maybe don't usually keep in touch with on a regular basis, and you happen to know that they are extremely isolated and alone. Maybe now's a good time to reach out to them and maybe give them a call every once in a while, check in and see how they're doing. In times like these, a little kindness goes a long way, and it could also make you feel pretty good too. So the sixth tip I have is to meditate. And this is something I did back when I was recovering from this emotionally abusive relationship. And it kind of fell off that bandwagon. But I'm starting to pick it back up again because I know how powerful it is, and there's tons of research to support meditation for anxiety. When you're feeling anxious and when you're feeling stressed out, they call that the stress response, or it could also be called the fight or flight response. But researchers can actually see on an MRI the effect of meditation on that stress response. And they actually have called that the relaxation response. So meditation can be really powerful. At the very least, on days when I cannot meditate, I make a very serious attempt to be more mindful. So not thinking about the past, not thinking about the future, thinking about and focusing on the present moment. So the last tip I have is to practice self-care. When you are in an emotionally abusive relationship, so much of your time is focused on the other person. Especially if you're in a relationship with a narcissist. These people are notorious for the look at me, pay attention to me. You're not important, I'm important. And even if you think you didn't fall into that trap, even if you think you didn't feed that person's ego, you probably spent a lot of time trying to make that relationship work. And if you were in a relationship with a narcissist, you felt like you were banging your head up against a wall. But that was time focused on external things. And this is a time to focus within. So do things that make you happy. Focus on that self-care, whatever that looks like to you. It could be eating right and exercising. It could be doing your nails, or it could be painting, singing, poetry, whatever lights you up. Do it. A lot of us have more time on our hands these days, and now is the ideal time to fit in things like meditation and self-care that we struggle so much to fit in our normal day-to-day lives. So those are my 7 tips to help you manage fear and anxiety. These are things that have worked for me, and I would love to hear what works for you, because I know that you guys have some tips too. So let's talk about it in the comments. If you have something that works for you, leave it down below and we could all benefit from it. So if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. And if you aren't already subscribed, consider doing so, and I will see you next time.